Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad that you could come. A little while back, we developed a questionnaire, which is pretty typical when we're doing work with an organization or another type of group, just to make sure that everybody understands what's in the questionnaire. We went ahead and set this meeting up so that we would have that information available. And what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I have a copy of the survey question, the questionnaire, that I've added some additional illustrations to in the form of photographs. And I'll just start talking about that. So I'm going to switch that over. Hopefully I can find that. There it is. Come on. Where'd it go? This always happens. Okay. Can't find it. Let's go. Screen share. Well.
Denise, it's up.
You've got it.
You just need.
Is it up?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if it
Yeah,
was
you
because
just-
I wasn't.
Full screen. If you full screen.
Yeah.
So that
Full screen it.
Gotcha. Okay, so what I'm looking, can you all read it? Because I can make it bigger.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
full screen it, make it bigger.
There we go.
There we go.
That's better.
All right, so I'll move my monitor over a little bit here. I'm surrounded by screens. So as FD was saying, we decided to approach the grant situation with a feasibility study to start things off. And the reason why we do that is because it gives everybody a really good idea of what the issues are and what potential solutions are. And we're always bringing things back to where they relate directly to stormwater quality. And that kind of, it reaches out into different areas like stormwater quantity and some other things that are going on in the property, but everything in the long run comes back to stormwater quality. And the reason why that's important to the community, of course, is because eventually stormwater that's running through all the different properties and across roads and paving and everything ends up in the stream and goes downstream to the river, which is where we get a lot of our water. So by treating stormwater for quality, we kind of reduce the risk to ourselves as a human population, and we also keep the cost of treating for certain chemicals down and pollutants. So I'm going to go ahead and start and talk about what we're looking at, and that is to reduce erosion and flooding at and from the site. And we started looking at this to look at that basin that's next door that has been at high volume and velocity, just throwing stormwater across your property. And part of the issue is the fact that it's so big, the water runs through concrete swales and then comes out of a very large orifice or head wall and to get to your property. And there's really nothing to slow it down. It just dumps and then goes as fast as it can. So you've got a kind of a runnel that's back through there that's actually turning itself into a stream that's really not supposed to be there. So the whole situation has caused soil erosion, damage. You've had some damage to the building, breakdown of stormwater structures, especially the big structure that's down in the concrete swale. Pavement issues have come up, and problems with curbing in different areas and flooding. Now, not all of them come from the water that's running through from the basin next door. Some of those are just from runoff from the building and from, you got a lot of parking, and that is what we call impervious surface. Water can't get through it, so it just runs directly off, contrary to what Mother Nature would like it to do, which is to let it infiltrate into the ground. So we want to, as I was saying, improve water quality downstream. We want that all that stormwater and from the vehicular pathways, from the building roof that carry all these pollutants to really slow down and allow itself to infiltrate into the soil. And that what that does is that kind of pulls the, if done right, it will pull those pollutants out of the water. So the church lies within the North Elkhorn Creek watershed, and North Elkhorn is as a lot of streams are, what we call an impeded stream, meaning that it has a lot of potential issues and real issues as far as the pollutants and whatnot that it's carrying. So we want to deal with that as far as your site, what's going on there now and what could go on in the future. And then one of the things that the stormwater grant does is to provide a level of education that the work can provide to the community. So we look at different ways to sort of interpret that and share that with the community. And it could be, it's the folks from your congregation, it's neighbors, it's other churches or other organizations that are interested in this. And you can invite school kids over and just develop a program after all this stuff is done and kind of during it too. Sorry, to get the community involved with it. And that's what we want to do, is to spread the word and let people see that the things that you're doing on your property are part of your commitment to cleaner water and better care of the land, and that's something that they can do too. So we address this through best management practices. And a best management practice is something that takes, what am I trying to say? It is a method of dealing with all different kinds of things that becomes a low impact method of doing things that doesn't include a lot of, especially with stormwater, doesn't include a lot of additional paving. We're trying to reduce the paving, we're trying to reduce the force of the water, and we're trying to give it an opportunity to infiltrate. So there's several different types. If we go over to the next page, we can look at things and the mechanisms that how they work and figure out what would be best for the issues that we ran into with your property. And let me just tell you, the tour of the property that we took at our meeting with the trustees was very informative. We had looked at the water coming in from the basin before. We could see that that was an issue. We could see that some of the water that's getting underneath the paving in the back lot was getting worse. And then we saw some other areas in the paving where things have kind of, fallen in and that need to be addressed, and it's all caused by stormwater. We also made note of some flooding that has occurred, I think in Jana's office, that has been cleaned up, but that's quite likely to come again. And you look at the way the stormwater comes off of the building, and you can see that a lot of it's running off the way it should be, going downhill, and then some of it's kind of turning back at the building. And when that happens, eventually it will find its way into your building, one way or the other. So we looked at that too. So let's look at the different types of BMPs. So infiltration basins, and that's what I was talking about, was having some way for water to kind of settle down and then seep into the soil. So what we do with that, these are constructed, And what happens is they include several layers. We dig down a couple of feet and we put in usually a stone layer, gravel layer underneath that's big enough to have spaces between the particles that allow water to sit in there. Below that is the ground that's originally there. And then above that, we'll use topsoil and sometimes mulch too. And then we'll plant that so that there's two things going on. The water is slowed down, it's sinking into the soil, and the plants that are there are helping to pull some of those pollutants out, because there are specific plants that will do that and they will really go to improve the quality of the water that's there while giving themselves nutrition. So that's the first one. And then a rain garden is very similar to an infiltration basin. Usually when we refer to the two, an infiltration is a bigger thing, and then a rain garden is more like a garden that you would put in to solve maybe a smaller area. And it's a really good thing to do when you have roof runoff that is causing problems downstream. It gives it a place to go and settle, and it has a really good aesthetic quality too. So this particular illustration shows what it looks like, kind of cross section. And then this is showing the type of problem that it was addressing. In other words, there's a lot of runoff that came into this particular area, and there's not usually a lot of water there, but when it rains hard, and we are getting bigger and bigger storms as time passes, you want to deal with that. You don't want that sitting there and then flowing off and taking soil with it. So this is the treatment that's very similar to this, where there's been an indentation, and then you dig down and put a gravel surface underneath and then soil on the top. And this has very specific plants that perform those two functions. They absorb pollutants that are in the water, and they perform an aesthetic function. So they really look good. Now, another type of sort of infiltration basin is called a bioswale. And a swale is just a kind of an indentation, but it's long as opposed to wide in the ground that kind of lets water run down through it. By doing this, in the illustration at the left, you can see that there's a fair amount of material underneath the planted area that is going to pull that water down and let it absorb. And then this sort of setup where you've got the impervious surface of the asphalt, or could be concrete, but it's usually asphalt. That water is draining to the swale. And this is a fairly newly constructed swale that is built specifically to let that water draw in, and that's what those little holes are there. They're a place for the water to come through. And you would do that from both sides. And yes, they may fill up to the top, but they also infiltrate within a short amount of time. Short being, you're always looking for no more than 24 hours for water to be sitting in one of the basins. Hopefully, when you design them, then the storms don't get even bigger, and they probably will, but we're trying to prevent that from happening. So, and speaking of parking, this is another thing that we can do. Now, as you saw, this this paving is impervious. In other words, it's not letting any water through. It's draining toward the swale. This is a different kind of paving that's called permeable or pervious, depending on what it's made of. And I selected this photo because it really shows the whole idea of having the spaces between the pavers. A lot of pavers are made that they don't have that big of a space. They're tighter. They're called interlocking pavers. But this is a really good, oh, yes, I will. Scott was just asking me if I'm going to talk about future opportunities for the backlot. Yes, I will. But this is a kind of paving that you can do. And what this paving does is it draws the water down away from the surface. It gives it a place to accumulate. So it's kind of like a retaining or a detaining basin, but it's underground. You can't see it. And then and that's concrete instead of the pavers. And then this shows a pervious concrete. And he's just demonstrating how quickly the water passes through it. In other words, it's not flowing off. It just keeps going in through the pavement. So there are real advantages to this, and it's getting less and less expensive to do pavers like this because companies have developed a way of doing this faster than somebody down on their knees and putting it in paver by paver, which takes a long time. The concrete works very well, but you just have to make sure that the person that is installing it or the people that are installing it are well-versed and have experience with it. And we always put that, when you get to construction, we always put that in a specification. In other words, that guy down the street that, that does a lot of landscaping but has never seen this before is not the kind of person that you want to do that. You want somebody that's experienced. So there are additional best management practices, and these are things that are like roof rainwater collectors. In other words, instead of bringing your stormwater pipes down from the roof into the ground, add a pipe down the road somewhere, or connect it into a much bigger system. This is a different way to store water. And what this allows is a place to keep water so that when it's hot and dry, you have a source of water and you're not using your city water, because a lot of people, even in rural areas, are still on city water. And if you've got gardens and if you've got vegetable gardens, things that people are doing, you've got a source of water kind of waiting to go in. They require some filtration, but it's not sorry, it's not a big deal. Now this one here is one that LFUCG gives out, and usually if you have a small building, this might be okay. If you have a larger building, you probably want a series of them and maybe put them, like your building has a very large perimeter area, so that might be something that you could do that would provide some water for each of those areas. And then new tree plantings. I think it's something that gets overlooked when you're talking about stormwater quality, because there are trees, and especially with your all's wet area from the water coming from basin next door, you look for trees that actually do well in that kind of a situation. They tend to absorb more water than the average tree. They don't mind having their feet, so to speak, underwater, and they will absorb those pollutants and whatnot that tend to accumulate in the runoff water. And then we have perennials and shrubs that we can use in rain gardens and wetland areas. And we try to use native plants because they're more in tune with the soils and the weather that are in this area. So we try to find plants that are native to, the area that you're designing for. Now, when you get into flooding and wetlands, and you kind of have that situation down behind the parking lot, there are many plants that are suitable for that. And this is, of course, showing some cattails. Yeah. So, but there are many other plants, and it's kind of nice that the water is moving through the site, but you kind of create a larger settling area that will allow the water to slow down and actually provide a more visually pleasing area, and an area that wildlife, the ducks find it. I don't know where they come from, but they seem to find them in our area. So there are certain things that go into the actual creation of a wetland, and there are certain things that can be done to help the way that the system works. But the wetlands are just a really good thing to do on a piece of land because they are so important to our water quality. So I'm gonna stop there for the moment, and I'm gonna go back and talk about the things that we looked at as far as what is there and what are the future things that could be there. When we look at the potential best management practices that we could use, we want to look at resolving some of the issues that you have, but we also want to look at future things that could be on the property. And so we're looking at the condition of your paving. Evidently, there's water getting underneath the pavement in the back of the back lot, the big back lot. So that's a potential area where we could do some pervious or permeable paving. That's going to have to be fixed anyway. And a lot of times you can come in and do, as you were seeing there, you can do parking spaces with permeable paving or pervious pavers. And then the aisles can remain asphalt or whatever other material that is. So that's a potential thing to look at. Now you've got the smaller parking lot over on the side where you park your bus. And that's really sinking down on the end. So you know that there's been infiltration underneath that pavement. The curbing has broken and dropped down. The curb inlet that's down there is probably pulling some water out of there, but it's probably leaking too. And then we went and walked down below that, and your wall that is kind of holding up the neighbor's yard is in really good shape until you get around the corner and it's their portion of it and it's kind of fallen down. So what we want to make sure of is that the water that's coming off of there has a place to go. And there is a series of stormwater manholes that are down there. We just want to kind of make sure that it's going in there. A couple of other things are the flooding that occurs kind of around the building and how that's being dealt with. You've got lots of lawn out there, and so the potential for making sure that your roof water is coming down where it's supposed to be is good. Now, the other thing that we talked about and looked at was what is happening with the back 40. And I say that facetiously, but I can't remember how many acres it is, but it's probably close to that. Beyond the wetland area and toward the back of the property as it goes uphill toward Martin Luther King Park, there is the potential to add some development in that area. And by development, I believe we are talking about some kind of cause-related housing. It could be affordable housing, it could be senior housing, it could be related to a specific cause that you guys deal with or are involved with. And I say that because we have a client that does development, and it's mostly cause related. They have an interest in providing affordable housing. So that's one of the things that they always do. And then they've done stuff like the AVOL, the AIDS patients and people who are in recovery for that. They've built a place specifically for them where they can get the services that they need and have a good environment for their needs where they're living. So that's the kind of thing that we could be looking at too. And another thing that we talked about was, what do we do kind of with the, you have to get from one place to the other. So there is a road that's down at the bottom that could be continued across the wet area that would require probably a bridge. Now, we may not need to do a full bridge if we can get it in there, if we can extend that roadway toward the back. The other alternative is to have it be more of a walking path and a walking bridge that people would access with a gator or something like that, where you actually wouldn't drive toward the back. I think that looking at the potential for having a community garden back there to grow whatever you want, but usually you're trying to get that to where you can grow food, maybe some seating areas and a trail that would go back there would really be a nice transition from the church property and parking area through the site and to whatever development that you decide to put in there. And then the adjacency to the park is wonderful, because that's that's kind of a nice progression through there. And I think down the road, this will be discussed in much more detail and much further. For now, what we want to do is just make sure that we're all aware of the types of things that could happen in the future, because we need to look at the effect that those things are going to have on stormwater quality. If you put buildings there, they're going to have roofs. It's probably going to be some paving. If we do get cars back there, then you would have parking and a roadway circulation system. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. So Scott, can you think of anything else that I've left out of there?
Hey, Denise, yeah, I was just going to, and I'm looking real quickly here. You may want to take and pull up the 60 scale map that shows the property, so that people, I know that they're probably aware of it, but get a sense of the scale that we're talking about, especially in terms of the rear property, and what the potentials are for, maybe having, as you mentioned, some types of other improvements along there, as well as then talk about, you can use your cursor to kind of talk about where the areas are that we've seen issues regarding to the existing stormwater concerns that we identified when we were out on site. Do you have that?
I'm just trying to figure out where
it's under CAD, under PDF, and it says site in 60 scale.
So that's the one. Okay, let me see where that pops up. Right here. Okay, let me take this and scoot it over here. Scoot. Okay, so can you
There
all
we go.
see
Yeah.
that? Yeah. Okay, so what we're talking about, this is your area here. And this is the church building, the back parking lot, side parking lot, and then the little parking lot that is sort of sinking down toward the end. Right here, you see the concrete swale that takes the water from the parking lot and pulls it into a structure down here. And that structure has sort of started crumbling over time. So that would be something that we would look at doing. And
that's the structure that's on your property. That handles your stormwater runoff from the building and from the parking lot, not the adjoining detention basin. Denise, can you kind of point that out in terms of?
which
The
the
adjoining
inspector-
detention basin, in terms of where we're getting that runoff.
Right. The
From
big
upstream.
runoff is coming from this basin. As you can see, there are a bunch of concrete swales that run through here. So each one of these has a head wall that's pulled water from the rest of this subdivision and pulls it into here. Now, because the swales here are concrete, water travels through there pretty fast. And then when it gets done traveling through there, it goes through a culvert and into a very large head wall that comes out right on your property. So this area that you're seeing in here, and that shows up really well on here, is all of that wet area. There is a runnel sort of that runs through here, and it actually empties out into the next door people. But in the meanwhile, a lot of it just sits here. It comes in very quickly. It kind of eats up soil, and then it eventually spreads out, but it's not set up so that it's doing what it should do as a wetland. So that area is, kind of the big area that everybody has been looking at doing something about. So behind that, there's some growth, tree growth, and this has gotten pretty heavy actually, or even over the last year. Everything is growing kind of hog wild, and it's difficult to see what's going on there. And of course, it's been difficult to have a maintenance program that is not, well, how do you get a mower in there? I mean, you just really can't. So, but up here, as we're looking and going up this hill, as you can see, it gets fairly steep. These are all the contours that are running through there, and there is drainage that comes down this hill. Where you see these contours kind of pointing up, there's water going down through that. So it is ending up sort of in the same place as this water is ending up. So they join together and then they head off into the next door neighbor. So when you look at this and you think about, well, what could we do with this property? And you think about, okay, if we had buildings, if we had a road, if we had parking, you're probably looking at this area primarily up in here. It's much flatter. I mean, it's not flat, but it's flatter, and it could be much more easily utilized for, whatever use you decide you want to do. And then the roadway that is kind of hard to pick that out. It comes in here and it follows your road kind of coming in. This is the point at which there would need to be some sort of a vehicular transition, which generally means a bridge or very large culverts. And we try to avoid the culvert thing because then again, it is concentrating the water. So we would like or prefer to have a bridge. Now, if that becomes something that is just too expensive, and that's an expensive one, then we could do more of a wider pedestrian trail that would go back there. So if you had people living up here, staying up here, or doing whatever, they would have a way to get back and forth. So that's something that we'll look at as far as what would the cost of that be and how would that happen, just to help you to decide what you would include in there. Obviously, a roadway is going to be much more impervious surface than a walkway would be, or a trail. So those are the things that we want to consider there. Okay, Scott, you got anything else?
Well, yeah, just to say that rear portion of the property does have some potential access points coming off of wind-burned area that we could access. So don't think that you have to have a road coming off of your frontage to have access to that area. There's some public roads on the backside that could take in.
That's true. And it's flatter here, so
Yeah.
making a
So,
transition from
the-
these roadways would
Right.
probably be easier.
But, you know, just to kind of get to Denise's point, we want you all to think about is not just, you know, resolving some of the issues that are immediate, that are in front, that we've talked about in terms of the pavement, deteriorating, some of the drainage around the church that we can, you know, address, but also, you know, kind of dream, kind of plan for the long term. You have approximately, you know, 9 to 10 acres in the rear of the property there. And what would you want to see? You know, if you were, and part of what you want to see is, you know, you may not want anything to occur, and that's fine. From a standpoint of, you know, if you wanted to leave it natural, then that's perfectly well, you know, intentioned that we can, you know, accomplish that. Or if you want to use it for a walking trail, or a meditation space, or a space of personal reflection, that's fine. We can, you know, we can program that in. But the idea of, you know, addressing not only your short-term goals here of the issues that are surrounding the existing building, but also, you know, what are these possibilities for the future, and what occurs down the road. So that's why we really want to take this opportunity now to talk with you all about these different possibilities, because we can nestle development into stormwater management. In other words, if you want to do something in the rear, we can then take and use stormwater management as the guides to help you guide through that process. So I guess what I would close with is, don't let limitations, you know, don't let yourself be limited by the just thinking that it's only stormwater. We can work our way backwards into this. So in other words, if you think of something, we can probably find, I jokingly say I'm Kevin Bacon of stormwater. I can always find a connection between other types of development and stormwater. So don't be limited to your thinking in terms of what you want to see as far as improvements. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Okay, let's see. Let me. All right, I'm going to move this guy over. Well, yeah, go right there. So, does anybody have any questions at this time for what we've gone over? I think we have a couple of new people that have joined in. So if there's anything that you would like to ask at this point, we've gone over kind of our reasoning for doing this, and our best management practices that we would like to have everybody look at, and maybe effective for dealing with the stormwater issues that are on the site and future development. So that's what we were doing, looking at the aerial view, just taking a look at the property and where potential development might occur in the future. Okay. All right. Well, we've gone through and talked about we've talked about all the BMPs, which are the best management practices. Now let's go over to the survey questions. So I'm going to go through them, and I would like to know what questions that you have, or if you're not understanding what we're asking for. So the first question is, have you noticed any problems with the campus? And by campus, I mean the grounds and buildings that you think might be caused by excessive stormwater runoff. If so, describe one or more. Naomi, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. your little square just came up there, so just want to make sure. Okay, so this is going to be the types of things that you would see on a regular basis. If you've seen water leaking into the building from a downspout area, or evident, you know, what am I trying to say? Most visible is the water coming in from the big basin next door. And there may be some other things that you've seen, because we've talked about the effect of stormwater and impervious surface on the paving, your actual parking paving. So that's that one. The second question, of the following BMPs, which do you think might be most effective or pleasing to the eye? List these in order of your preference, indicating your highest preference with a 1 and lowest with a 9, and then kind of everything in between. So this is just like those questions that we got in school when we had our tests and pick one. But this is actually just putting them in order. So, you know, if you're looking at two different things, effectiveness for dealing with stormwater or pleasing to the eye. And that could be both. Like a rain garden is usually a very pretty thing. It's very aesthetically pleasing, and it performs a stormwater function by letting water infiltrate. And then you can go through and look back at the illustrations that are in here for each of these different BMPs, and I added a couple in there. You know, we've got a thing on wetland. I said improved wetland, and then I added nature trail. So I'm interested to see where people kind of put that. Any questions on that one? Okay. Question 3. What's your favorite area on the church campus site, and what makes this area special to you? How could it be improved? This one we always ask as an essay question, so it doesn't have to be very long. Usually people will have a place where they like to go that's outside of the building somewhere. It might be walking along a road or a walkway. It might be the little garden that you have that's enclosed, or it might be somewhere you know, that's closer to the front lawn. So that's just something that's a personal preference, and it's just a you know, bringing it out there and saying, why is it special to you, and how do you think it could be improved, or do you think it could be improved? Do you like it just the way it is? So that would be that one. And the second part of the questions have to do with education. And as I said, the stormwater grant has a requirement for you to include the community by sharing what you're doing with the community through, you know, different groups. And you know, kind of we discuss and look at other target groups, civic organizations, might be school classes. There's also Kentucky Interfaith Power and Light, which has been active with some of the churches in the area to kind of connect the philosophy of the church with what they're doing with their land. So here are some questions that are related to that. And of course, I need to move that over. Okay, so question 4, sharing information about best management practices on your campus is part of the Stormwater Quality Grant. So name up to 3 items about the format for education and sharing that you think would be useful. Now, this could include things like we could prepare a pamphlet, or we could have some interpretive signage. We could include members of the community or a class or whatever in some kind of building activity. Say a rain garden that was being built or being cleaned and replanted, that sort of thing, that could be offered to the community as a way to kind of bring them in to the whole stormwater procedure and process that you've done, and to be able to see how you're interested in what and how they perceive your kind of respect for the land, enjoyment of nature, all of those sorts of things. Any questions on that one? Okay. Question 5, what particular groups or organizations would you like to have participate in educational opportunities on your site about the BMPs and green infrastructure? And you may have connections with other churches. You may have connections with other congregational groups. You may have connections with civic groups or particular school classroom that you think would work out well. You could invite people from the city to come out and have a walkthrough, that kind of thing. So those are things that it's just whatever pops into your mind as far as the types of groups that might be interested and that you can pull into the site. Okay, so the third area is sustainability and the church's mission. And by sustainability, we're talking about using your resources efficiently while protecting those resources for future generations. Sustainability is a word that is bandied about a great deal. We think that it's really important to what we try to accomplish with these stormwater grants, because we realize that the natural resources of water, soil, vegetation, and clean air are really important to our overall health, especially with climate change, changing things rather rapidly, actually. So question 6 is, how do you think the sustainability of your campus fits in with the Wesley United Methodist Church of Lexington's mission and vision? So I think you have to have a pretty good understanding of what your mission and vision is. And some folks might need to be reminded of that. Not because they need to know it, but because they might not remember exactly what that says. So that would be a good thing. That would be an area of discussion. How are we fitting this in? Some churches are very specific about that, and some are not. So it may be something that you want to talk about. How do we make this statement beyond just what we're doing on the land? How do we tell people about it? And how do we tell them that it fits in with your mission? So any questions on that one? Okay. Question 7, how do you think site sustainability, green infrastructure, which is what we're talking about when we talk about these best management practices, they are things that we do to protect stormwater and remove pollutants and stop soil erosion, that are not involving really big engineered things like big pipes and head walls and things like that. We're looking to utilize Mother Nature as part of the way to deal with all of this. And those things can very nicely fit into the landscape and have a really positive impact on how you think about your land and how you deal with your land. So questions on that one? Okay. All right, so question 7 also includes how can it help address community diversity? And of course, this is a term that gets bandied about a lot, but this is an issue that has been somewhat ignored in the design field. And we think that it's really important because there needs to be an inclusivity of all groups in the community so that all areas of the community physically, that the land itself are treated respectfully and in conjunction with what's going on next door, what's going on down the street, what's going on the other side of the city. People need to be aware that a lot of times, not necessarily in Lexington, but in other cities, there are groups that need to be, have more attention paid to their areas because they tend to live in older areas of the city, downhill areas of the city, and those areas tend to have been ignored as far as upgrading things. So that, you know, I think that's something that's really, really important. And I'm sure that you all have talked about that a fair amount. Okay, so what I'd like to know is if you were sitting down and filling this out right now, what would be the most difficult question for you to answer? Shall I pick on somebody? Okay, Cordelia Jackson, since you're right in the middle of my page, can you answer that question, do you think? You have to unmute yourself. There you are.
Hello.
Hello.
I think all that you have presented has been really good, but to answer that particular question, I would really have to think about it a little bit more.
Sure. And
but it's
the reason,
good information.
Sorry, go ahead.
Very good information. I don't know, I would punt that back to one of the people on the trustee board to answer.
That's true. I mean, they've been sort of introduced to it before, and if you have questions, and this is for everybody, if you have questions, and you're going along and you're like, what on earth are they talking about here? Feel free to contact Scott or myself directly, and Jonna has that information, the contact information, and or ask one of the trustees. They may be able to go ahead and answer it for you.
But in short, I guess, I'm sorry not to cut you off, Denise, but
no, that's okay.
I guess, you know, just to see what would be most important to me is what is most detrimental to us right now with this stormwater drainage problem that we're having.
Right.
And what needs to be taken care of immediately. Mm-hmm. What are the immediate needs?
And I think for that question, I don't remember what question it was, but I think for that question, it's like, what are the most critical things to deal with, or what are the most obvious? That's probably going to be number one. So that is something that we will definitely be dealing with directly. But then we want to also deal with the other issues to make sure that we're utilizing the feasibility study to give you a good big picture and kind of a master plan for the future. So that when we then go after funding for some of the projects, you usually can't do it all at once, but you put in for kind of your highest priority, and that's part of this too. We do prioritization, that we will, you know, have the right idea about what it is that you want to do first, and then second and third.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because I think for generational looking forward into the future, mm-hmm. for future generations, it's really good for the sustainability in our church's mission as well.
Right. Well, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. And those are the things that we want to direct this toward.
And thank you for picking on me.
I enjoy picking on people that I can't see. Okay, does anybody else have anything that they would like to say, or any other questions?
Okay. Thanks, Denise, for actually doing the presentation, because even, you know, I had seen the questionnaire before, and now having actually, like, even just having the photographs that you shared alongside of the questions, mm-hmm. now when I go back, and I'm probably speaking on behalf of everybody else too, when I go mm-hmm. back and you've got that list of terms there, now I can visualize what you're referring to.
Right.
Prior to that, I would not have known. And so that was why we wanted you all to come and actually share this with everybody else.
Which we're very glad to do. We're just really looking forward to this whole process. And of course, we've been in the process, but you all don't necessarily know that. So I think our next step will be to, for you all to do the survey to the best of your ability and knowledge, and then we'll take the results from the survey and do a summary of those. And that way, we go through the questions and we can see where the greatest priority is for each of those questions. All righty. Well, I think we're done. Sorry.
This is Michelle. And I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Hi. First question, your presentation was excellent. How
Thank
does
you.
one get a copy of that? That's my first question.
Okay.
Second question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Second question. Once the survey questions come up, and you indicated that you all would summarize, at what point will the feasibility study come into play?
This actually is part, the survey is part of the feasibility study.
Okay.
So it includes that survey, it includes any meeting notes that we have, it includes a concept plan based on what feedback we are getting from you. It will include a budget for all the items and usually a prioritization. In other words, it could be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. That happens over a period of years. It's very rare that somebody can do all of their stuff in 1 year. So this is the next big step after the feasibility study is done, is to go after a construction grant. So that would include the actual design with construction documents and then the construction itself.
And that was going to be my third question. And I think basically what you've kind of summarized is a physical condition and needs assessment, and kind of list what's most important and what that's going to cost.
Yes.
I am, being in housing myself, I'm very familiar with permeable pavers. In fact, we've got a number of developments that we've put them down probably 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
We do have a rain garden at one of our developments, so I'm familiar with a number of these.
Well, very good. So I guess we'll send everybody to you when they have questions.
Oh no,
That's right. That's right.
I already got my hands full. Okay.
So
what
anyway,
will happen
to answer your first question, that was something that John and I were discussing earlier today, is where exactly the survey is going to go. And normally what we do is we have the organization post it on their website. So there's a place that you can go and you can either download it and fill it out and scan it back up, or send it to her, or hand it in when you're at church, or however you want to do that. We usually leave it up to the congregation. And then what we will do is take the results and tally things up and then provide a summarized version of what we see in all of the surveys. So the more people that can fill the survey out, the more representative it will be of what the congregation as a whole wants to see or would like to see in the future. So if you can kind of do a little rubbery arm twisting for people that you think might be interested in doing it, that would be good.
So how does one, in doing the survey, how does one be able to read this presentation in order to answer the survey questions.
Oh, well,
I'm asking that because I do believe that there are a number of people who maybe don't necessarily understand that this is a storm water quality issue.
yes. And as Scott was saying, there are many things that we can do with related issues that we can kind of connect to stormwater quality. And probably an example of that would be the situation with your wetland there, because the issue starts with too much water, too fast, and no place for it to settle down. So that's really a stormwater volume issue, but it has created a stormwater quality issue. So we deal with both of those things at the same time. And that's just an example. I could probably think of other ones, but not right at the moment.
Well, I mean, an example would be, as you mentioned earlier, runoff from additional structures or from additional development. I mean, that would be a clear example of a opportunity to take and address water quality, water quantity, runoff at that time. And again, as mentioned, doing permeable pavement, doing rain gardens is not only, beneficial from the standpoint from a standpoint of water quality, but we can also address water quantity. And if we're looking at it from a standpoint of, existing development or new development, we using the Water Quality Incentive Grant Program might be able to have ways to reduce some of the costs associated with those implementations of those systems.
Okay, Michelle, did I answer everything that you had asked? I think I did.
You did.
Okay, great. All right, so Jonna will let everybody know exactly where she's going to put the survey so that you can get to it.
Yeah, she'll be working with
Okay. Yes, I'm pointing the finger at you. Okay. Yes.
I guess I need to back up when I said you answered my question. This presentation, is it in a format that one can have access to and read?
The whole meeting has been recorded.
Yep.
So if being that you have the Zoom is on your end, so you should be able to access that.
Yes, that will be available just like we do the other video.
So you can go through it or skip through part of it if you're not interested in that, and it will tell you basically everything that Scott and I said. And I see Kevin Wagner.
Kevin has his hand raised. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Kevin.
So good evening. Thank you. Also, just those same things that you all have said. Well presented. Helps us out what's happening. I guess beside you mentioned hand wrangling some of the people to get some of the, what is the timeline? Are we looking at a month? Are we looking at 2 months? I mean, I know you all are working with.
No, I really didn't stop and we didn't talk about that. I guess that depends actually when Jonna can get the survey up and available. So Scott, what would you say would be, normally we try to do it in like 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think if we can get it back from a month from now at the end of February would be a good goal to have. And then it would take us a couple of weeks to do the processing. So, we want to kind of keep this moving in case they're out of this feasibility study, there comes a project that you want to implement or find a need to implement in a timely manner because of the grant cycles. The next grant cycle will, for your category, which is the Class B category, will be due at the end of July. So we want to keep this moving in a timely manner. So again, if you all choose to implement one of these measures that comes out of the study, that we do it in a timely manner, that you would be able to submit for another application, just to keep the process moving forward for you all.
Thank you.
And on our end, we can actually get it ready for you all within the next couple of days.
That's good. Good. All right. So I look forward to getting responses to that and some good participation, and hopefully we'll be able to do a good summarization of that.
Looks like Pastor Sunday has his hand raised.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Denise. Thank you, Scott, for a wonderful presentation. And just on the last point that was made by Scott, you talked about the grant cycle and the category D, or what did you call it? Can you expatiate a little bit more about that, and what does that entail?
Sure. So yes, I apologize. Sometimes I and Denise recognizes this. I tend to be like a jet aircraft. I take off and I'm hoping everybody's hanging on. So there are two classifications of the grant program from Lexington Fayette Urban County Government's Water Quality Division. There are what are known as the Class A, which are residential neighborhoods that can apply for funding, but they must do it through a nonprofit organization or like an HOA. So an individual cannot apply for the grant itself. The Class B grants are for all other entities that pay into the stormwater user fee. So even though churches are a nonprofit organization, this is a stormwater user fee, and therefore all entities that have impervious area pay into the program. So these are basically dollars that you have paid into the program that are now coming back to you in the form of the grant, and also in form of possibility of an implementation project. The grant itself is done on a yearly cycle in which the grant application is due. So we are currently in, this grant is currently the 2022 grant cycle, or the fiscal 2022. The next grant cycle will be fiscal 2023, believe it or not. And it will begin on the fiscal calendar for Fayette Urban County Government, which is July 1st. And so the next application will be due on at the end of the month of July. The notice will then be for the award won't occur until October. And so we're, more or less a full year out if that project would be awarded to you before we would get notice to proceed. So that's why we want to just keep this feasibility study moving in a timely manner, so that, again, if you all decide, and it's totally up to you, your decision, but if you all decide that you wish to move forward with an implementation project, that we do it in a manner that gives you time for us to apply for the next cycle. Did that help?
Mud.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, any other questions? And of course, if you think of something, either let Jonna know, or you can email us directly. Be glad to answer that for you.
I do have a question, but I don't see my hand. I can't find where I need to put my hand.
Oh, your little hand thing. Yeah, it travels around.
You mentioned, Denise, you mentioned early on in the presentation, North Elkhorn. Is this North Elkhorn or Cane Run watershed?
I believe it's North Elkhorn.
The grant that we already have.
Yes,
It is, which one?
North Elkhorn,
Okay.
I hope. I better go back and look before I guarantee that 100%. But I'll tell you, most of the major streams in Lexington, I probably could say all, but I never like to say all, are impacted in one level or another. Most of them are impaired. So, and that means that, oh no, they're getting so much runoff, they can't deal with it. So, you know, we're trying to make an effort through these projects to kind of clean the water up. And it, you know, every little bit helps. So we can't do the entire community at once. And a lot of people won't give up their usual practices. So anything that we can do with an organization, with a neighborhood, with a church, any other type of property like that is going to be helpful. And that's why the education part of it is so important too. Share that out so that other people will also get the idea that, yeah, it's a good thing to do. Okay, anybody else? All right, well,
I'd just like to, I just wanted to thank you guys for the presentation, and thing I think
very welcome.
Thing I think is so important from for those of us who are joining this was the explanation of, maybe some people know what a rain garden is and a bioswale and those type things, but for most of us, or at least for me, those are totally new concepts. So in order to help us to answer these surveys, it's kind of nice to know
Yes.
what they're talking about. And one of the things that I will do, Jonna, we can put the survey on the website as well as other ways. I mean, some people may want us to mail it to them or something of that nature, but I can put it on the website so that they can download it and fill out the survey that way, along with some of these other pictures and images and so forth that have been presented tonight. That way they can see them, as well as through the looking at the recording again. So I'll try to help make it available to everyone who's interested. But again, thank you guys for the presentation. That was very good.
Thank you all for attending and for your questions, and we'll be moving along. Okay, Jonna, did you want to say anything toward the end here? Or?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. All right, folks. So when we get this back, we'll be contacting you within 2 weeks of that, and we'll have the results of it, and then we'll move on to the next step, which is a secret. So, all right. Well, we will talk to you soon.
Yes,
thank
you so very much. Denise and Scott, you have really persisted with this project and helping us. I think this is the second or third time you're meeting with us, so we are grateful, and thank you for your diligence in regards to this work. So we're thankful.
Thank you. We enjoy it.
Thank you. God bless. All right.
Okay, everybody.
All right.